Now moving to best legendary American battle tanks. Number 10, M4 Sherman, early 75mm M3 gun. The Sherman built its reputation as America's workhorse tank, but the earliest production models earned a darker nickname among Allied crews, Ronson, after the cigarette lighter company that advertised itself as always lighting on the first try. The M3 75mm gun mounted in these early Shermans was excellent against infantry and fortifications, but it struggled badly against the frontal armor of German Panthers and Tigers appearing in Normandy in 1944. Crews found their shells simply bouncing off enemy hulls at combat ranges. Compounding the problem, early Shermans stored ammunition without wet stowage protection, meaning a single penetrating hit could ignite the ammunition racks and turn the tank into a fireball within seconds. Tank crews grew to fear engagements at range against German armor, knowing they often had to maneuver dangerously close just to have a chance of penetrating enemy plating. It's why this version of the Sherman opens our worst list, not because the tank was worthless, but because its guns simply hadn't caught up to the threats it was facing. Number 9, M3 Lee, M3 Grant. The M3 was rushed into production because America desperately needed a tank with a gun powerful enough to fight German armor, and it needed one fast. The result was a compromise vehicle with serious design flaws baked in from the start. Its main 75mm cannon was mounted in a side sponson rather than a rotating turret, forcing the entire tank to expose its broad silhouette just to aim the main gun at anything not directly ahead. On top of that, the M3 stood unusually tall, nearly 10 feet high, making it an easy target for German anti-tank gunners in North Africa. Crews also complained about riveted armor construction, since incoming rounds could snap rivets loose inside the hull and turn them into deadly fragments bouncing around the crew compartment. British tank crews who used the Grant variant in the desert respected its firepower advantage early on, but nobody pretended the layout made tactical sense. It was a stopgap design, built to buy time until something better arrived, and it shows in nearly every decision made on its blueprint. 8. M3 Stuart. The M3 Stuart light tank performed admirably in 1941 and 1942, when its 37mm gun and reliable engine gave Allied forces a fast, mechanically dependable vehicle during desperate early campaigns in North Africa. British crews nicknamed it Honey for its smooth ride and dependable performance compared to their own tanks of the period. But by the time American forces faced German armor directly in Tunisia, the Stuart's weaknesses became impossible to ignore. Its 37mm main gun could not penetrate the frontal armor of German medium tanks at any practical combat range, forcing crews into a purely reconnaissance role rather than frontline combat. Its thin armor, just over an inch in most places, offered little protection against enemy anti-tank fire. Crews described the Stuart as fast and nimble, useful for scouting and flanking, but increasingly unable to trade blows with the tanks it was meant to fight. Its early promise couldn't offset the fact that the battlefield had simply outgrown it. 7. M5 Stuart. The M5 was meant to fix the Stuart's problems, swapping in twin Cadillac engines and an automatic transmission that made it easier and smoother to drive than its predecessor. Crews genuinely appreciated the improved reliability and the surprisingly comfortable ride compared to earlier light tanks. But Army engineers never solved the fundamental issue. The M5 kept the same weak 37mm gun as the M3, meaning it still couldn't penetrate the frontal armor of German medium tanks it might encounter in 1943 and 1944. By this stage of the war, light tanks across every army were being pushed out of direct tank-versus-tank combat, relegated instead to scouting, screening, and infantry support roles. American crews respected the M5's mechanical dependability during long road marches, a real advantage over less reliable Allied designs, but dependability without firepower only gets a crew so far. It's a tank that succeeded at being an excellent light reconnaissance vehicle, while failing at the job many crews were still forced to ask of it. 6. T-14 assault tank. The T-14 was a joint American-British project designed to create a heavily armored infantry support tank capable of surviving direct hits while punching through German defensive lines. On paper, its thick frontal armor and dual-purpose gun looked promising. In practice, the project collapsed under its own weight, almost literally. Engineers struggled to balance the vehicle's heavy armor with an underpowered engine, resulting in a tank that was sluggish, mechanically strained, and difficult to maintain in the field. Only a handful of prototypes were ever built, and none saw combat, meaning the enormous investment of engineering hours and manufacturing resources produced nothing usable for the war effort. The British ultimately rejected the design for their own forces, and the US Army quietly shelved it as better options became available. The T-14 represents a category of wartime failure that doesn't show up in dramatic battle stories. Money and time spent chasing a design that never solved the problem it was built to solve. 5. M22 Locust. The M22 Locust was built to answer a very specific and ambitious question. Could you actually fly a tank into battle by glider? Designed to be transported inside British Hamilcar gliders and dropped directly into airborne operations, the Locust sacrificed almost everything for the sake of being light enough to fly. Its armor was dangerously thin, barely enough to stop rifle fire in some places, and its 37mm gun was already obsolete against German armor by the time it saw combat. Crews found the tank cramped, uncomfortable, and mechanically underwhelming, offering little confidence once it actually landed on a battlefield. The Locust saw extremely limited combat use, most notably during the Rhine crossing in 1945, where its performance did little to change the course of the operation. It solved the transport problem brilliantly, and the combat problem barely at all. As a piece of engineering ambition, it's fascinating. As an actual fighting vehicle, it was already outclassed the moment it touched the ground. 4. T-23 Medium Tank. The T-23 was one of the more intriguing experimental medium tanks the U.S. Army tested during the war, built around a novel electric transmission system that engineers hoped would simplify driving and improve reliability compared to traditional mechanical gearboxes. It also introduced a new turret design and a powerful 76mm gun that would eventually find its way into later Sherman variants. But the electric transmission proved heavier and more complicated to maintain than expected, and logistics officers balked at introducing an entirely new powertrain system into a supply chain already stretched thin across multiple theaters. Despite promising test results, the Army ultimately decided the T-23 wasn't different enough from the existing Sherman to justify a completely new production line. Several hundred were built, but none were sent into combat, making it one of the more expensive dead ends of the American tank program. Its real legacy is the turret and gun it passed down to later Shermans, not the tank itself. 3. M6 Heavy Tank. The M6 was America's attempt to build a true heavy tank early in the war, packing thick armor and a powerful 3-inch gun onto a massive hull. Engineers believed a heavy breakthrough tank would be essential for smashing through fortified German positions. Instead, the M6 became a case study in over-engineering. It weighed over 60 tons, making it enormously difficult to transport by ship, an urgent problem for a war fought almost entirely overseas. Its complicated electric transmission was prone to breakdowns, and testing revealed persistent mechanical unreliability that made commanders nervous about deploying it in the field. General Leslie McNair and other Army planners eventually decided the vehicle simply wasn't worth the shipping space or maintenance burden compared to the Sherman, and none were ever sent overseas. Fewer than 50 were built. It stands as a striking example of a design that solved the problem of firepower and armor, while completely failing to solve the problem of actually getting the tank to a battlefield. 2. M2 Medium Tank. By the time Pearl Harbor was attacked, the M2 medium tank was already hopelessly obsolete, and the Army knew it. Riveted armor, an underpowered 37mm main gun, and a design philosophy borrowed almost entirely from pre-war thinking made it unsuitable for the kind of armored warfare already unfolding in Europe. Its side sponsons bristled with small machine guns in a layout better suited to fighting infantry than enemy tanks. When German panzers demonstrated devastating effectiveness in France in 1940, American observers realized almost immediately that the M2 could not survive that kind of fight. Rather than deploy it, the Army rushed its replacement, the M3E8 into production, meaning the M2 never saw combat overseas at all. Its real historical significance isn't what it did in battle, since it did nothing, but the lesson it taught. America's pre-war tank doctrine was already dangerously behind, and catching up would require rapid, sometimes rushed development decisions that shaped the flawed designs still ahead of it on this list. 1. M2 Light Tank. At the very bottom of this ranking sits the M2 Light Tank, a design so thoroughly outdated by the time America entered the war that it never stood a chance in real combat. Built in the mid-1930s with thin armor barely capable of stopping small arms fire, and armed with nothing heavier than machine guns in most variants, the M2 reflected an era when tanks were still viewed primarily as infantry support and reconnaissance tools rather than dedicated fighting machines. By 1941, it was already being phased out of frontline units, relegated to training duties as its successors entered production. Crews who trained on it found it mechanically simple and easy to drive, but simplicity meant nothing against enemy armor it could neither penetrate nor survive contact with. Its true legacy is as a stepping stone, the chassis and lessons learned feeding directly into the M3 Stuart, as a fighting vehicle meant for World War II combat, though it was already a relic before the first American shot was fired. Now moving to best legendary American battle tanks. Number 11, M4A1 76 W Sherman. The upgraded M4A1 with the 76mm gun represented the Army's first real answer to the firepower problem that plagued earlier Shermans. The new gun offered noticeably better penetration against German medium and heavy armor, giving crews a fighting chance at ranges where the older 75mm simply couldn't compete. Just as important, the W, in its designation, stood for wet ammunition stowage, a redesigned storage system that surrounded shells with water glycol solution to drastically reduce the risk of catastrophic ammunition fires after a penetrating hit. Crew survivability improved dramatically as a result, and after-action reports showed far fewer Shermans burning out completely once wet stowage became standard. Tankers still respected the Panther's frontal armor advantage, but for the first time since Normandy, crews felt they had genuine tools to fight back rather than simply absorbing punishment. It marks the turning point where the Sherman family stopped being a liability against German armor and started becoming a credible threat. Number 12, M24 Chaffee. The M24 Chaffee finally gave American light tank crews what the Stuart family never could: a genuinely effective gun paired with real speed and mobility. Armed with a 75mm cannon derived from aircraft weaponry, the Chaffee could actually threaten German armored vehicles instead of merely scouting around them. Its torsion bar suspension gave it a smoother ride across rough terrain, and its lighter weight meant it could cross bridges and soft ground that heavier Shermans had to avoid entirely. Crews praised its reliability and its ability to keep pace with fast-moving reconnaissance operations late in the war, especially during the push across France and into Germany in 1944 and 1945. It didn't replace the Sherman as the Army's main battle tank, and it wasn't meant to, but within its intended role as a scout and flanking vehicle, it succeeded almost completely. The Chaffee proved that a light tank didn't have to be a compromise. It could be genuinely excellent at exactly the job it was built for. Number 13, M4A3 75 W Sherman. The M4A3 variant introduced a critical engineering shift. A single-piece cast and welded hull built specifically around the reliable Ford WW2 engine, replacing the mix of imported and improvised power plants used in earlier Sherman variants. This standardization made maintenance simpler for American mechanics working under intense time pressure in the field, since parts and repair procedures became far more consistent across units. Combined with wet ammunition stowage, crew survivability continued improving even before the more powerful 76mm gun became widely available. Drivers appreciated the Ford engine's dependability during long road marches across France, a real concern after earlier Sherman variants suffered breakdowns that pulled tanks out of action before they even reached the front. It wasn't the most powerful Sherman on paper, but it was arguably the most dependable, and dependability kept tanks running and crews alive during grinding, extended campaigns where mechanical failure could be just as deadly as enemy fire. Number 14, M4 Sherman Duplex Drive DD. The Duplex Drive Sherman solved a problem no other American tank of the war even attempted. How do you get tanks onto a beach during an amphibious invasion before infantry arrived to secure it? Engineers attached a collapsible canvas flotation screen and twin propellers to standard Sherman hulls, allowing them to swim ashore under their own power and support infantry from the very first minutes of the assault. On D-Day, these tanks were meant to provide critical fire support precisely when landing troops needed it most. The concept worked, but only under the right conditions. Rough seas off Omaha Beach caused many DD Shermans to swamp and sink before ever reaching shore, drowning crews trapped inside canvas screens in turbulent water. Where sea conditions were calmer, particularly at Utah Beach, the DD Shermans performed exactly as intended and provided crucial support fire. It's a design that proved genuinely innovative and occasionally life-saving, while also revealing just how unforgiving amphibious warfare could be to even a clever solution. Number 15, M4A3 76 W Sherman. Combining the reliable Ford-powered A3 hull with the improved 76mm gun and wet ammunition stowage, This variant became one of the most balanced and widely respected Shermans fielded by American forces in the war's final year. Crews finally had a tank that offered dependable mechanical performance, meaningfully improved firepower against German armor, and significantly better survivability if it did take a hit. It wasn't a match for a Panther's frontal armor in a straight duel, but in the kind of mobile, flanking warfare American doctrine emphasized, it gave tank commanders real confidence rather than the anxious caution earlier crews described. Maintenance crews appreciated how straightforward it was to service compared to some of the more exotic tank designs other nations fielded. By late 1944, this configuration represented the Sherman at its most mature. A tank that had absorbed every hard lesson from Normandy's early battles and emerged as a genuinely capable, trusted fighting machine rather than the vulnerable Ronson crews had feared just months earlier. Number 16. M4A3E8 Jumbo Sherman. The Jumbo was built to answer one specific tactical problem. American forces needed a tank that could lead an assault into heavy German defensive fire without immediately becoming a casualty. Engineers dramatically thickened the Jumbo's frontal armor, nearly doubling it compared to a standard Sherman, turning it into a slow but genuinely tough breakthrough vehicle. Infantry commanders specifically requested tanks like this after watching standard Shermans get knocked out attempting to spearhead assaults against fortified positions. Crews who operated Jumbos described a noticeable psychological difference, a real sense that the tank could absorb hits that would have destroyed a normal Sherman outright. Its extra weight made it slower and less agile, and relatively few were produced, meaning most infantry divisions had only a handful available for their toughest assaults. But where it mattered most, leading attacks into the Battle of the Bulge and beyond, the Jumbo consistently proved it could take a beating and keep fighting, exactly the reputation its designers had hoped to build. Number 17. M4A3E8 Calliope. The Calliope took the dependable M4A3 Sherman hull and transformed it into something entirely different. A mobile rocket artillery platform capable of launching a devastating volley of unguided rockets before an infantry assault. Mounted with a rack holding dozens of rocket tubes above the turret, the Calliope could saturate a target area with explosive firepower in seconds, something no conventional tank gun could replicate. Crews found the system effective for breaking up enemy concentrations and softening defensive positions immediately before an attack, though the rocket rack itself was vulnerable to enemy fire and had to be jettisoned if the tank needed to fight conventionally afterward. It never replaced standard gun tanks and was never meant to, serving instead as a specialized shock weapon used selectively during major offensives. As an experiment in combining armor with massed rocket artillery, it succeeded well enough that it directly influenced post-war thinking about mounting rocket systems on armored vehicles. Number 18. M4A3E8 Sherman Easy Eight. Widely considered the finest version of the Sherman to see combat, the Easy 8 combined the reliable Ford-powered hull, the effective 76mm gun, and a completely redesigned horizontal volute spring suspension that gave it a dramatically smoother ride across rough terrain. Crews immediately noticed the difference, describing far less bouncing and jarring during cross-country movement compared to earlier Shermans, which meant better accuracy on the move and less physical exhaustion during long operations. It arrived just in time for the brutal winter fighting of the Battle of the Bulge, where its improved mobility across snow and mud proved genuinely valuable against German forces struggling with their own mechanical breakdowns in the cold. Tank commanders trusted the Easy 8 more than almost any other Sherman variant, a sentiment reflected in its continued frontline use well after the war, including service in Korea years later. It represents the Sherman platform reaching full maturity, every early flaw addressed through hard-won combat experience. Number 19. T-26E3 Pershing Early Combat Trials. Before the Pershing became a standard production tank, a small number of pre-production T-26E3 models were rushed to Europe in early 1945 for direct combat evaluation, most famously during the fighting around Cologne. There, in a widely documented engagement, a Pershing traded shots directly with a German Panther tank and won, destroying the Panther before it could destroy the American tank. It was a genuinely significant moment, proof that American engineers had finally built a tank capable of standing toe-to-toe with Germany's best armored vehicles, rather than relying on numbers and flanking tactics to compensate for inferior armor and guns. Crews who tested these early Pershings reported far greater confidence facing German heavy armor than they'd ever felt in a Sherman. Mechanical issues remained, since the vehicle was still essentially a field trial, but the combat results spoke for themselves. It proved the concept behind America's next generation of tanks was not just sound, but overdue. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more deep dives into the machines and the crews who fought World War II.